Hello there, and welcome to Nick's Digital Literacy Armchair Musings number 1. And in this videocast, I'm going to attempt to reflect on the first lesson of my Digital Literacy Practitioners course, which I started today at Tusky Pro in Aberystwyth. I'm just going to go through a number of the tools, technologies, techniques that we engage with today on the course. And just give my kind of thoughts, reflections on that today. Some of the things that we engaged with today were today's meet, which is a web page which you can log into really easily and post your comments, thoughts, also links. As a class and collaborate essentially. We also looked at Nearpod, or at least that was the vehicle that Alison, the tutor, used to kind of impart the session material. We did also engage in some active tasks in Nearpod as well. We looked at Edmodo, which is a VLE, a virtual learning environment of sorts, not dissimilar to Moodle, but a proprietary piece of software, if you like. Again, free to use, but a way of uploading assignments, accessing resources, and so forth. We also looked at Hackpad, which was something I had used once before, though I'd forgotten. Is again another collaborative resource that multiple users can interact with at the same time and edit in real time. And what else did we look at? I think that might have been about it actually. I'm just going to go through each of those digital resources, technologies, or software, if you like, and reflect on them in turn. Today's meet was our first kind of resource that we engaged with. I have used it before, or at least I've not used it as a practitioner, sorry, but I've engaged with it as a learner before in conferences, staff development events. Really easy to use. You just need the web address. You need a device, obviously, and you just put the web address into the device. You're immediately onto a collaborative page. You put your name in. You don't have to put your name. You can put a nickname. You can be completely anonymous and write cheeky nonsense if you want to, as I sometimes do. But really easy to use, and a great way of gathering the thoughts of those in the room, but also of imparting instructions or web links to useful websites that are going to be used within the session. I would say advantages of that are that it is very easy to use. It doesn't need a password. You can be anonymous. You can set yourself up as just with a pseudonym, if you like, and so there's no worry about kind of the embarrassment of your contribution being on the screen. Depends how confident you are, I suppose. If you've got less confident learners, it's a good way in which they can kind of hide their identity so that they can be more confident with their contribution, I guess. But also a good way in which the teacher or the deliverer of the session can monitor the contributions of the class and also reply to contributions and post links to the students to follow, to click on, to take them to other places, which our tutor did quite effectively. Our tutor used Nearpod as a I suppose as a sort of main delivery system, in a similar way to many of us might be familiar with using PowerPoint, in the sense that it provided a thread to the session overall. It was a day session, and the tutor kind of had it in the background, if you like, kept coming back to the Nearpod pages, as I say, to make a sort of a thread through the session. I've seen Nearpod used before. A colleague of mine, Jim West, who's on my PGCE course, has used it very effectively, has done a really good session, what we call a skill swap at Coleg Heredigion, where he demonstrated how he used it with his learners, and also got us to have a play with it too. I've seen it actually, I've observed him use it in one of his catering sessions as well, really effectively, really engaged the students exceptionally well actually. Every single student was engaged. It ought to be said that every student needs a device. It's obviously it's a necessity. You could pair, I suppose you could pair, but it's better if every student has a device, which may not always be possible, but once everybody has got it, it is easy again to log into. You don't need, don't think you need your own login. No, I think you can just put in a code. Yeah, you can just put in a code that's given to you by the tutor, and off you go. You're engaged essentially in a sort of an interactive PowerPoint presentation, although that's probably doing it a disservice to say that. Alison, our tutor, used it in various ways. She used it to poll the class to get responses to questions, quite simple questions, just to get us to engage, I guess. Also used it to display content the same as you would a PowerPoint. Also used it as a quiz tool, where we were invited to answer a series of questions, which could be marked, so she could gauge, I guess, our proficiency or what we'd learned or what we knew by looking at the results of those quizzes. They can be displayed on the screen, which again, responses can be anonymized so that you don't have to see, who got them all right and who got them all wrong, that kind of thing. So that's quite a good function, but a nice way for the teacher to check learning in a really quick way, because you get an immediate response or a feedback screen, which learners don't need to see. We were also engaging with Edmodo, EDMODO, which I've come across before. It's a VLE, a virtual learning environment. I suppose similar to Moodle, but there are some significant differences. Edmodo is, again, it's free to use. You can set yourself up as a teacher or a student quite easily. I was using it as a student today. Its main function today within our course was as a site for our assignments. So in actual fact, this blog will become part of an assignment for the course, and I will upload, I guess, a link to this video, or at least the WordPress site that this video will be embedded in, hopefully, and that will be uploaded to Edmodo, and it's essentially a way for our tutor to track our assignments and to mark them. She can also put feedback on there as well. I've used Edmodo a bit before as a student, in a similar way actually. I was asked to write a reflective log on a short course I did about 6 months ago. Seems quite intuitive, quite easy to use. Its interface is probably more familiar for students because it's It's kind of a little bit like Facebook in the way it looks and the way that you use it. And in that respect, it seems to be a bit more attractive than Moodle. But I will say I've got a bit of a downer on Moodle at the moment, but that might not be Moodle's fault. We also had a look at something called HackPad. HackPad is a collaborative space, essentially. I suppose it's a bit like a real-time wiki. I suppose it is a wiki, really, in that you can set up a page or a site and invite people to join it. So we did actually small group work. There's 3 of us in the group. We were invited to engage in a task whereby we had to think of a learner or a particular kind of learner profile, a particular learner with particular needs, and design or devise ways of using digital literacy to engage that learner or meet their needs. Working in a group of 3, I set a HackPad page up very quickly, invited the other 2 in the group to collaborate too, and they could type into this space at the same time as I could. We could all do it at the same time, which was really useful actually, because as we were talking, we could add things. Once we'd written something, we could edit it. For example, I was able to move some things around to give the site a bit more structure, which the other 2 could have done as well. It's kind of handy to be able to talk and record our thoughts, decisions, and the output of our discussions straight away. And my colleague Gwyneth, who's in my group, realised that it might actually be a really useful tool for students to create minutes of meetings that they're required to have as part of the Welsh baccalaureate course that she teaches, and which I'm probably going to be teaching next year. So that seemed like quite a powerful use of it. Obviously, some difficulties arise from all working on the same thing at once, in that immediate editing or changing of one another's contributions and the ordering and structuring of that, I suppose, can be problematic. With us as cooperative adult learners, it was quite easy, and we were sat opposite each other, so we could manage that quite easily. Maybe with younger learners might be trickier. You'd certainly have to practice. And also, if it were to be used with learners who are in different locations, which it probably is designed to do, that could be problematic and might need to be done via some sort of audio link, Skype, something like that, so you can actually talk at the same time, possibly. Be interesting to see how it would work without that face-to-face or even audio communication being present, just as a sort of a text-based collaborative tool where the collaborators are in physically different locations. I can't immediately see how I would use HackPad in my teaching, although having said that, I have used Office 365, the class notebook tool, the collaborative space within that, but not in the same immediately collaborative way, in that you're writing something which at exactly the same time as your colleagues or your peers. But it's an interesting tool, which I'll have to have a think about actually, as to how I would use that a little bit more. I also had we also had a look at Padlet. Now I'm quite familiar with Padlet. I've used it in a couple of sessions. In fact, yeah, a number of sessions now. But I haven't been using it in the way that I first saw it used. And where I first saw it used was essentially, I suppose, a substitute for post-it notes being stuck to a wall. I'm a big fan of the post-it note for jotting down ideas, learners jotting down ideas, responses to a question, and then stick something on the wall. Everyone can see it, and we discuss the contributions that they've made. Padlet is just a digital way of doing that. You can, as long as you've got a phone or a device, you can write your contribution and it appears on the screen, so for everybody to see. It's not great on phones, in fairness, because your screen is usually too small, unless you fancy you've got a big Samsung Galaxy, whatever it is. It's about this big. The screen is not big enough. Nevertheless, it's really easy to use for that purpose, but that's not how I use it mostly, and it's not how my colleagues have been using it. I have a colleague called Tim, who's on my PGC course, and he uses it, as many of us are using it now, as just a repository for lesson content, meaning that he will put on onto a Padlet wall an assignment brief, for example, his objectives, maybe some resources the students need to use in that lesson, for example, I don't know, maybe some images, maybe actually a little bit of software, because he teaches video animation, computer animation, and it's essentially a page which becomes the go-to site for his students to access to participate in the lesson. Now, he's in a situation where, again, all the students are on a computer already. It's they're in a computer room and they access the Padlet and do the tasks, engage in the lesson. And the beauty of doing that, and I've seen lots of other colleagues do this as well now, is that you can essentially just dump whatever you want into these boxes, which I suppose were intended to be used as boxes where learners would deposit their own thoughts, but actually they just use it to access the resources, a bit like they might use Moodle, but you haven't got to log into Padlet. You just need the address, and it's much easier to use for that reason. So I would say a lot of my colleagues are beginning to use it sort of instead of Moodle, really, because of ease of use, because of it's got maybe a more attractive interface. It's not a list of links which do tend to look quite dull. It's a sort of free-form page where they can access everything you need them to. And in actual fact, my colleague Tim has started using it. He's starting setting up Padlets, individual Padlets for each student to use as an online portfolio. So they just put on to their Padlet page whatever they want him to assess. It's their kind of response to his tasks. And you can also, because of the way Padlet works, you can set each of those up so that they're password protected. It's just the student that can access it. So I've seen some really powerful use of Padlet. I'm beginning to use it in that way myself, and would like to push that a bit further, I think. In terms of my thoughts on digital literacy in general, after today, although I would say each of the technologies that I've seen today and engaged with, I've seen before, I am broadly more enthused about their use and feel a bit more confident about using them. I would say particularly Edmodo, because that's something I'd not really used properly before, and I'm quite keen to use that and to understand how it works, and also to consider using it with my learners as well. It's important to stress that in our session today, the IT worked well. Alison, our tutor, pointed out that we were in the best room for engagement with IT. I'm not sure what she meant by that. Perhaps it was Wi-Fi connectivity, which can be an issue. It was fairly, things went fairly smoothly. Having said that, there were issues. She spent quite a bit of time going around sorting out teething problems where people hadn't quite logged on yet, couldn't figure out how to log on, couldn't collaborate with a particular piece of technology or tool. I wouldn't say at all that it disrupted the session. I think maybe she'd planned in to her delivery a sort of a buffer in terms of the amount of time she would have to spend doing that. But and this isn't a reflection on Alison at all. It's worth pointing out that is always going to be the case when using digital literacy tools. Learners, it doesn't matter who they are, whether they're advanced adult practitioners like us, advanced using that term loosely, will always have problems or little issues logging on and getting the software to work. And because none of us are computer experts, and even the experts struggle, we're all going to have time taken up by sorting out these login issues. So you either just accept that and have to plan it in, or we need to think about really seriously ways of making it much more convenient for learners to access this stuff. And that's maybe a thought that I'll return to in subsequent Armchair Musings, because it's a major issue.